Hello and welcome to another edition of Back of the Grid. I'm your host, Stu, and I'm joined as always by Tom.
Hello.
And by Chris.
Hello.
Hello, boy. Hello, gentlemen. It's exciting. It's exciting week this week. We've got Imola coming up. Lots of upgrades, lots of big news to talk about. And Chris is going to take us through the news right now. So what we got, Chris?
Yeah, we sort of touched on this last week, but kind of there's a bit more detail around it now, and that is the Alpine situation. So the Alpine CEO, Laurent Rossi, has sort of been taking fire out of the team via French media. And
Seems like a good idea.
Yeah, he called their recent performances amateurish, among other things. It also seems like Otmar Szafnauer, the team principal, seems to be the one bearing the brunt of this pressure. Obviously, they've not had the best start to the season. Their pre-season target was to finish fourth again, but closer to the top three. They're obviously not achieving that right now, but it is extremely early days. There's obviously also the quite public embarrassment of them losing both Alonso and Piastri in pretty farcical circumstances.
Yeah. So it's a lot of things that have sort of added up over a period of time rather than just instantly sort of thrown the toys out of the pram because the performance situation isn't quite where they want it to be. It's more.
It almost feels like a bit of
built up.
Yeah, it almost feels like a bit of both, doesn't it? Like there's been this rumbling under the surface, and then maybe if they'd started this season well, a lot of that would have gone away, but they haven't. So it all seems to be kicking off. The interesting backdrop to all of this is that there are rumours circulating of them potentially wanting to sell part or all of that team to a so far unnamed American company. Laurent Rossi and the Renault CEO Luca De Meo were both in Miami last weekend, which, I mean, obviously the bosses being at a Grand Prix is not news in itself, but they're not bosses who particularly go to every single Grand Prix like some others do. So the fact that they were both there kind of turned a few heads. And obviously, if you're looking to either bring investment in or make a sale, you want the team to be looking at its best, which is not necessarily how they've been recently.
Yeah, but I think I don't think that's going to add any value to the team either, is it? Going out onto French media and calling them all amateurish. That's a good way of sort of knocking a few mil off.
Yeah, well, the only thing I can think of is this him starting the ball rolling to ultimately make Otmar a bit of a scapegoat for all the problems and oust him and be kind of, look, we're making changes and we're fixing the problems. Please come and give us your money. Like that's maybe a version of it that
I don't know. It seems strange to me for them to want to offload it and be saying all this stuff about it. I think if you were trying to offload the team, you'd be bigging it up and talking about the future of the team and all the resource that you've invested into it and the changes you've made, and you'd be focusing maybe on last year rather than on the current poor performance of the team. So
I sort of agree with Stuart. It doesn't sound like the kind of talk you'd do if you were wanting to sell the thing, unless you were trying to intentionally drive the price down, which as the seller, that's usually not the case.
Unless you're buying it from yourself.
Genuinely, the only other thing I can think is that maybe they've got someone in mind to replace Otmar that they want in, and they're trying to, like you say, make a way of just pushing a load of blame to his door and get rid. But he's not been there that long, has he? Really?
Yeah. Well, there is
a scheme of things.
There is a former Ferrari team principal who's just sort of become very available.
There have been rumours of them talking to him. I mean, I don't know. Personally, I think getting rid of Otmar would be a massive mistake. I think that guy's done some really amazing work, both there and at Force India / Racing Point.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, maybe that's it. Maybe he was better at doing a lot with a small budget versus... And then again, Alpine don't have the biggest budget. Considering they're a manufacturer team, I don't think they've got the biggest budget in the game by a long stretch.
Yeah, and also Binotto didn't really do. What did he really do at Ferrari? They had an opportunity to be in contention for a championship last season, and under Binotto's watch, they unfortunately squandered what was a really, really good race car really early on in the season. So I don't think necessarily Luca Binotto is the solution to Alpine's problems.
I think Binotto is a good technical boss. He's not necessarily a good team and people boss, and is that what they need right now?
Who's main tech at the minute? Is it Pat Fry?
At Alpine?
I know he's there, but I can't remember what capacity he's in. So I don't know if he's technical director or...
He's not. Matt Harmon is their technical director.
Okay.
Pat Fry. Pat Fry is chief technical officer. Matt Harmon is technical director. So yeah, you're in the
broad sweeping question alert. How do we even feel about Alpine as an F1 team, and how do we feel about Renault as a engine supplier in Formula One? Do we care about Renault? I guess is the question.
The same question turned up in Discord recently, and they've been around in various guises for years now, and I just feel like they're one of those teams that's always talking about what they're going to do in 2 or 3 years' time, and 2 or 3 years' time never seems to actually happen.
Yeah.
It does make you wonder, what Renault... Renault are not even technically, I suppose they're not Renault, are they? They're Alpine with a Renault.
I guess Renault are engine suppliers now, aren't they?
Yeah, they're not really a manufacturer team.
Sorry, Macheko in the chat. If Nico Hulkenberg was a team, he'd be Renault. And that is pretty accurate.
That is a pretty accurate
Very
assessment.
much just, they're there or thereabouts, but they're never really...
Journeyman.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like Renault kind of along for the ride in Formula One, and not necessarily that. I feel like the company, when you look at the Mercedes operation and the money that gets pumped into Mercedes, and fair enough, the ownership structure at Mercedes is kind of, I guess, a little bit different because you got Toto owns, I think, 33% of it, then Ineos own another 33%, and then Renault, AMG Mercedes, own the other third of it. So that's kind of like a nice split of management structure. No one party is necessarily burdened with funding the entire team. It's kind of split 3 ways. Although I'm sure Mercedes do pump plenty of cash into it because it's a very good advert for them. Or it was until about 2 years ago. Renault don't seem to have as much skin in the game as what Mercedes do, as a manufacturer. It's not like everyone's going out and buying Renaults based on their F1 performance, It's kind of like maybe that team is there to show that Renault exist and to show that Alpine exist, and that's kind of their main marketing thing. But maybe it's doing enough just by being there. They don't necessarily need to be winning races and winning championships every week. It's just kind of like a flag to say, hello.
Yeah.
We make cars.
Don't forget us.
Yeah. That's literally the Renault F1 team, I think, for the last however many years is been, don't forget us, we're here.
Yeah.
Even when the Renaults were in the Red Bull, no one was talking about Renault engines. Everyone was just talking
except when they blew up.
Christian Horner was.
Well, yeah. Complaining about them.
Yeah. To be honest, I think if not for Luca Di Maio being in charge of Renault, I think they probably would have left in the last couple of years. But when he came, he's only been CEO of Renault for a couple of years now, but he was very much, when he came in, sort of talked about as being a motorsport person who saw the benefit of it and wanted that to be part of what they do. But how long he's going to be able to keep banging that drum if they're just sort of also rans?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, yeah, and they're not supplying anybody other than their own team anymore.
No,
which is probably another factor. What does that say about what people up and down the grid also think of the engine and the deal that they would have for selling it if nobody else wants to use it?
Okay, so here's the next question then. If Renault were to disappear, if we're saying that they're thinking about selling it, what name would you like to see replace Renault in F1? It's that old question of who's your non F1 team that you want to become an F1 team or whatever.
I mean, I kind of hope the unnamed Americans they're talking to would be Andretti.
Right.
Yeah.
And as much as the Andretti talk has shifted these days more towards them being a ground-up team, if there's an existing team there that's willing to sell some or all of their entity, that's a much easier way in.
I do think it'd be a shame to lose the Enstone base, though.
It would. That'd be a real shame.
That has been something that's kind of been part of that team's DNA for a long time. No matter what guys it's had, like that obviously goes back to Benetton era, and like so. I mean, it's not the end of the world if it moves, but I think that kind of that's sort of part of the DNA of the team that maybe the last couple of guys that Renault have put it through has kind of got lost. Maybe so that is part of the problem.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, would that not be part of the problem that they're maybe it's an infrastructure thing? Maybe the team doesn't have the resource and in its facilities to
possibly
to engineer a winning Formula One race car. You know,
well, don't they split half of the team between Enstone and half of the team in France? If I remember rightly,
in theory, I believe it is.
I think it's the engine side is in France, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's the Renault side, and then the race teams in the UK.
I'm not like obviously other teams do similar things, but a championship winning team probably isn't a team that's going to be developing two key components of the car in two completely different places separately.
Even Mercedes,
and maybe that shows in Renault.
Mercedes engines are in a different location, but it's kind of a short drive away in the same country. It's not like an overseas thing.
My French geography is not that great. I don't know how far from Calais Viry is, but so it's probably not that far of a drive from Enstone when you think about it. But
it is. It's near Paris, so it's not.
It's pretty close.
A million miles away.
Get on a train, mate. It's fine. Put an engine on a train, send it across. It's fine.
Just buy a second seat and slap a power unit down next to you.
I mean, you look at Red Bull, a lot of their 2021 championship winning year, that all their engine stuff was based in Japan. So,
true.
But how long did it take them to get there with it being based in Japan? Is the other side of it.
I suppose a lot of the work had already been done before Red Bull signed up with with Honda. So
So there's an element of that.
We're just getting into a bit of a geography lesson now, shall we?
Well, I just think that maybe this is where some of the problems actually lie. It was originally coming from a point of it'd be a shame to have the Enstone bit disappear, but it's more of a general point now, I guess, of are elements like that not going to be a problem? Like Ferrari does everything all in one place. Like Chris says, Mercedes is together. Red Bull is together now, and obviously look at the difference that's helped make. Like there's something to be said for it all being under the same
operation.
Under the same sort of vicinity, and working in a lot better synergy than a team like that. And there will always be midfield teams that have to do that because they don't have a choice, or they're they rely on an engine supplier. Yeah, but a team like that is Renault run, that is essentially a factory team, even if they run under the Alpine name, I would have expected them to be developing things in a little better synergy.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why Red Bull don't use Renault engines anymore, right? And that's probably a big part of the problem here. I think the engine maybe isn't quite up to the standard that the rest of the engine suppliers are at. I think historically it was always known for being kind of underpowered, and I think that's probably a big part of their problem. But then when they've obviously had a very, very poor start, and I think what it shows is that they probably had an okay chassis last season, maybe a really good chassis and some good aero last season, and then by having the worst engine and then suddenly having probably not the best chassis or aero, then it's all just fallen apart.
Yeah.
So difficult times. Difficult times for Alpine.
Very.
Yes.
And that's about all that's going on outside of Imola, really. So,
whoa there. What about Nick de Vries and Daniel Ricciardo? The vicious rumours that have been circling Daniel Ricciardo.
Oh, that non-story. Man goes to Italy, other man's F1 seat is in danger.
Yeah, man goes to Italy to do his job.
No. Man goes to Italy to go to a wedding.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah. Jamie Ricciardo went to a wedding. While he was there, he did a seat fit at AlphaTauri and the internet exploded. But
of course.
I mean, to briefly talk about it, even if they did turf out Nick de Vries, who supposedly has been given until Barcelona to turn things around, don't think it'd be Ricciardo that stepped in that car. Would Ricciardo want to step into that car? It's awful. It's maybe the slowest car on the grid. It is at times.
He's not going to put his best foot forward in that car, is he?
No.
If it came to it, I think they'd bring Liam Lawson back from Super Formula, to be honest.
All right. We kind of did this last week as well, didn't we? With the
a little bit, yeah.
Drivers kind of thing. So let's move on. Let's move on to. I'll let you read this.
Do you want to have a run at it?
I can go for it. I can do it. It's time for the Formula One Qatar Airways Gran Premio del Made in Italy e del Emilia Romagna 2023.
Rolls right off the tongue, doesn't it?
There you go.
I feel like that's simpler than previous years. I think we've dropped a sponsor.
Seeing it written down, it's pretty long. So the Formula One Qatar Airways Grand Prix of Made in Italy and of Emilia Romagna 2023. If it said "and of" in English, that would just never get through, would it? Like they'd never allow that to happen. So strange.
So weird.
It's Italian, man. It's fine.
Just keep adding more words until there's enough money to pay for them. So yeah, as we've discussed, this is going to be the weekend of upgrades. Pretty much every team is expected to bring something along with them. The ones that have mentioned any kind of detail, Mercedes have very much said that this new development path they've been talking about pretty much since testing, this is going to be the first kind of fruit of that labour. They're bringing new bodywork, new floor, and new front suspension at a minimum, which is a pretty huge update. Alfa Romeo have basically said that they've realised the car doesn't have like any one or two particular weaknesses. It's just a slow car. So they're kind of bringing updates to everything and they're hoping to gain a few tenths. And now AlphaTauri have said they're bringing some stuff for certain. Interestingly, Aston Martin have said they are bringing updates, but they are already thinking about next year's car. They want to start working on next year's car as early as possible, given that it's basically going to be an evolution of these regulations. There's not many huge changes, which is quite bullish from Aston Martin. But I think makes a lot of sense for them in the position they're in. It kind of already looks like they're going to come second, third at the worst in the championship. Why not start looking at next year already?
Well, they know they're not going to win it, so yeah.
Exactly, yeah. We already know who's going to win it, so we think.
Yeah,
hopefully.
I mean, it's so early. It's so early in the game.
Early.
Like, everyone's going to have egg on their face when some team, whether it's Ferrari, whether it's Mercedes, whether it's Aston, brings like some random upgrade, or when Red Bull are just reeled in suddenly.
When Bottas wins this weekend.
Yeah. Imagine, that'd be so fun.
What do we reckon then? Do we think we're going to see much of a change in the running order? What particular gaps do you think might close?
I think there'll be a little bit of shuffling around in the midfield more than anything. I think that's where there's the most to be gained, isn't there, for either teams that are not doing well or teams to maybe get a little bit of a jump towards what's at the front. But so I think that's where you probably see the biggest shuffling around.
That's kind of where I'm at as well. A tightening of what is already a pretty tight midfield, I think, is the most likely outcome.
I know where it needs to be in teams like AlphaTauri, for example, when it comes to that, because they need to get back on the pace quickly. And then, obviously, at the front, you want to see like Aston and Ferrari actually be able to take it to to Red Bull to some degree, but as I've already said, Aston Martin look like they're sort of maybe not too. They're sort of happy with just maintaining for now and focusing for next year, which
I think
could
Aston
work,
Martin
could not.
Aston Martin will have a keen eye on Mercedes this weekend to see if that's good. I think that's going to shape some of their development path, because if they really do want second, or if they're happy with third, then fine. But there is a chance from this upgrade that Mercedes will stabilize their platform and bring themselves more into the mix, or put themselves potentially between Aston Martin and Red Bull, which would be entertaining. I think the more all the teams can reel in Red Bull, the better, because no one wants to see one team run away with it. And if we're being completely honest, they probably are going to run away with it for the rest of the season. But it would be nice to see someone sort of nick a few wins off of them. And right now it looks like it might be Aston. Definitely. And if there's another team that can do that, it's probably Mercedes, if they can get in between Aston and Red Bull.
Because Aston share rear suspension with Mercedes, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's usually buy it when they're buying the gearbox.
Of course, yeah.
And all the gearbox stuff is homologated. I'll put my teeth back in again. Homologated, so you can't. They can't really change much about the rear suspension on the gearbox end of things, which means like your geometry is basically set from day one of the season.
So if Merc are bringing new front suspension, Aston are going to be keeping a very close eye on that. Yeah. It almost, again, it's still quite early in the season, but this almost feels make or break for Mercedes, doesn't it? Like, if this upgrade doesn't work, are they even going to want to put that much time and energy and money into the rest of the season?
Well, I think they're going to have to, because they need to. They have to develop. They need to They need to be able to run their car lower to the ground, and the only way they're going to be able to do that is by making the car less reactive under the brakes, less reactive through high-speed corners. It needs to be a much more stable, much more comfortable car for the drivers, a lot less peaky. And the only way they do that is by developing, obviously within the budget, unless you're Red Bull. Then
there's catering, Stu.
Then... So I think they have to keep going with it until they figure it all out. So even if the rest of the season turns into like a year-long test session for them, they're still going to have to put as much resource into understanding this platform, understanding the aero regulations, understanding the way the car works with the downforce and the dynamics between the suspension and the low running of the car and the underfloor downforce generation. So I think all season you'll see Mercedes throwing more and more and more at this car, so they can, because the more they throw at it this year, the more they'll understand for next year, and they've got the resource to do it. And they're only allowed to spend the same amount next year on that car as they are, well, a little bit less next year on that car than they are this year. It's not like they can just put everything from this year's budget into next year's car, right? Like, are the rules made so that you can do that? You can develop this year and develop next year instead. And then does that come out? You can
carry what you want forward as much as you want, depending on how the regulations change. So there's nothing to stop you doing development now that is prospectively for next year's car.
Well, essentially, you could bring next year's car forward, I guess.
Yeah, I would say that maybe you've probably got to have actively run it. I'm sure that the teams have looked at those kind of loopholes, and I would say that there's probably something in there that says if you spent development time and budget on it now, it has to run at least one session, for example, this season. But then you can carry it forward as much as you want, as long as it's in the regulations, surely.
You've got a lot more belief in the FIA's regulation writing ability than I have there, Tom.
I mean, it's a dumb regulation. I mean, they're all dumb regulations for the most part, aren't they? But it's a pretty dumb regulation if they've not thought of that. And me sat at home in my tiny little office couldn't think of it.
I suppose...
I
suppose the hard thing for Mercedes is... at some point, they need to decide if... because right now they are updating a car concept that hasn't worked really for them for a season and a bit now. And I guess at some point they have to make the decision, can we develop this concept into a winning car, or do we need to completely scrap it? And
well, the theory is that they've already done that. They've already completely scrapped that concept, because I've got a feeling that we're going to see a very different looking car on
I got a feeling we are as well.
I could be wrong, but I swear I saw something on the internet that was a picture of it with side pods, and it was something that someone had like regenerated from an F1 game. They take one of the other cars and put the current livery on it or something.
What I would love,
I feel like it popped up on Reddit and then disappeared. Like I can't find it now. I want it. Either that or I fever dreamed it over the weekend.
I would love it if they came back with something on Friday even more crazy than the zero side pod concept. Like they were just like, oh, well, that didn't work, so let's try this other crazy idea and see if this works, kind of thing.
Ginormous side pods, just
yeah.
Overcorrect.
Just literal like it's a Concorde wheeled out of the garage. So Mercedes have got a lot riding on this upgrade, a huge amount riding on this upgrade.
Yeah,
and I mean the rest of their season and definitely their development into 2024. So they need to get their understanding right. I guess like this has been in development for a long time. This has been in the works since well before Bahrain testing. They already knew that they weren't getting what they needed out of the wind tunnel from it. So Toto said that it's like should have been their start 12 months ago. But even then, that puts them like 12 months of development behind their nearest, their theoretical nearest competitors. So huge amount riding on it. They've just got to develop, work really, really hard on it this season, and hopefully when they can do more over the winter, they'll learn enough throughout the season to get them back in the mix. Because and this is not spoken as a particular Mercedes fan. This is just spoken as a Formula One fan wanting to see competition at the front. Because how good was the 2021 season when they were? You know, we'd had years and years and years of Mercedes dominating the sport, and then suddenly Red Bull are right in the mix with Max Verstappen. And I think that 2021 season, for all of its faults, was probably one of the best seasons of Formula One in the history of the sport, regardless of what you think of how it finished. I think the journey that we all went on together from race one through to the final race, should have been race 23, but I think it was race 22 or 21. I'm not sure, but it's a lot of races and it was a lot of fun. So I want more of that, please. So Mercedes, please make this upgrade work, and Ferrari, upgrade your car, make that work. Everyone be better and compete at the front.
Yeah.
Next storyline.
Nice,
Next one. Move on.
Next one. The other sort of big thing happening is that this is the first of the tyre allocation experiments that we're having this season. So the total number of tyre sets per driver has been reduced from 13 to 11. And then Q1 will only be hard tyres, Q2 will only be medium tyres, and Q3 will only be soft tyres. Right. I get the want to reduce the tyre allocations. It's going to put a big dent in the number of tyres that have to be lugged around the world. Like that. Yeah. I get that. It's a positive thing. The way they've decided to do it, I don't know. I'm not convinced by this as a change.
No. It just, you're messing with something that's not broken. We've said this so many times when we mess around with qualifying. Like, it's not broken, so just leave it alone.
Yeah. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
I get, look,
the fear I have is what they caused with the sprint shootout thing. That's the fear that I have realistically, is that they're going to do something that messing with the tyre allocations basically means that every single car ends up on the same dull strategy for a race because they've messed around too much with the tyre allocations.
Does this mean that they have to? Do they only have one set per session that they have to run, or do they get two sets?
No, they get multiple sets.
They just have to run that specific.
Yeah,
type of
they can run as many of that set as I've got, but I can only be that one. Okay. I think my biggest problem is Q1 now won't be which 15 drivers can go the fastest. Q1 will be which 15 drivers / 7 cars are best at switching on the hard tyres. That's all it's going to be. That the hard tyres are renowned for being a challenge to switch on. Some cars have a really hard. So, a lot of time you see cars doing multiple warm-up laps to get tyres going in qualifying anyway, and that's on the mediums, let alone the hards.
Yeah.
But they do have more time in Q1 to do laps and to get the tyre into the window. So Red Bull will probably be all right, because we all know Red Bull isn't the reason that they're more or less, it's not much between them and Ferrari in quali is because Red Bull struggled to get the tyre switched on. It's only in the race when they, once they are switched on, that they're untouchable, obviously. But during qualifying, they've been beaten a number of occasions already in qualifying on merit because that car is kind on its tyres.
Yeah.
And what you lose on Saturday, you gain on Sunday, because having good tyre wear on a Formula One car is, and when your Formula One car is that fast anyway, underlining all that, then it's worth the compromise, I think. So it'll be interesting to see how Red Bull react to it in Q1, whether or not they can sort of find some pace from it. I think it probably depends on the conditions as well. A lot of this, like if it's cool temperatures and they're all trying to get the hard switched on, then we could see some big names suffer in Q1. And that I don't mind. I don't mind a mixed up grid. I don't mind, because I guess what they're thinking might be, maybe this isn't their thinking, but like a possible result of this is that we get some fast cars much further down the grid than you'd expect them to be
I think that's in the back of their mind with this.
I get that, but it's also like just artificially manipulating it as well. Like,
yeah,
I see the logic, but I don't like it, because like if the only way to slow them down is to make them use a hard tyre in Q1 so that they therefore struggle when it's sort of, I mean, I guess you've got to develop your car to be good on all the tyres, technically speaking, but
that's part of the job.
That is part of it, but it seems unfair to favourably lean towards teams that are actually good on the hard tyre, even if it's inadvertent. So a midfield team that might struggle to get into Q2 and maybe even Q3 are suddenly ending up there just because Q1 is forced onto hard tyres where they are actually better. And that's, I'm not sure how I feel about that. Yeah. I mean, we all know that what tends to happen in the race is everyone kind of falls back to roughly the running order anyway, so it'll probably just cause mix-up for the first 20%, 30% of the distance. But
yeah, and then it'll settle down to an average. But we'll get a lull, won't we? We'll get the old lull that we always get. And we've had
that's how I see it going. I think that you'll maybe get one or two people that get a little bit further through because they're sort of favoured a little bit by somebody that's not as good on hard or medium tyres having to use them in those scenarios. They'll end up a little bit further in the grid, maybe even get to the top 10 when they normally wouldn't. And then what will happen is that driver will essentially just go backwards through the race because there's no race pace in the car. I don't want to put a name on a specific one, but I can see that'll happen to somebody.
What I want to know is how on earth the F1 teams this season are supposed to pick their tyre allocations based on what these tyres are doing. They seem so unpredictable. And
do they still pick them? Or
I think they do. Yeah, they do specify how many softs, how many hards, how many mediums.
I know during COVID they changed it to Pirelli just bought the sets, but I can't remember if they ever actually changed back to them choosing them or not.
Maybe someone in the Discord knows.
That feels like something somebody Discord would know.
When I've looked through the list of who's got what tyres, then they usually have often have different amounts of softs, different amounts of medium, and that's in recent seasons. That's probably as early as this season. Yeah, they do pick them according to Sarah. So
yeah, I think post that COVID season it was a bit weird.
Yeah. So my point here is,
we'll go back to that.
Back to my original point. My point is the circuits we've been to, the surfaces that they've been racing on, and the grip that they've had from the tyres has been so kind of mixed up. We haven't really had a normal race at all this season so far, and I think part of that is probably to do with these tyres I think another part of it is obviously they're driving in kind of wild conditions. There's like night races, dusk races, all kinds of like weird conditions that you wouldn't normally expect across a regular season. You wouldn't normally expect a Formula One car to be at that many different surfaces that quickly, that early. But I guess like that's just kind of part of the deal these days. How on earth can they make these decisions around the tires, not knowing, such limited data on normal running? Like, it must be really, really tough for the strategists to decide how the car's going to react to work out how the car's going to react to each different compound on a given weekend.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they're making the decision for them now, so it's fine.
They're
basically saying you've got to use these tyres, and we're reducing the number that you can pick from anyway, so it pretty much forces the hand, doesn't it?
This weekend as well, just to confirm, with them reduced to 11 sets, they are just giving everybody the same. So everybody gets 3 sets of hards, 4 sets of mediums, 4 sets of softs.
Right, okay. So that's kind of like, again, that's going to put certain teams at a disadvantage because there'll be teams
they might
among
take
that who are going to take more of a certain compound than another compound. Yeah, and that's going to hinder their entire race weekend. That's not just, that's not just the race that affects. That's qualifying. That's every practice run. Certain teams are going to have to be really, really careful with which tire they use, and also like working out the grip level. We might get to sort of the end of end of practice 1. And people be like, "Oh, we really need to not run a certain tire until we absolutely have to because we feel like our car is going to be better on this tire." And then they might actually run the tire and turn out not to be. So, if you look at the result of the last race, no one really knew what the tires were going to do, and that's kind of we talked a little bit about this in the last episode. But like everyone who ran the hard then medium strategy had an amazing, had a way, way, way better race than anyone who started on the medium and went to the hard. And it was because everyone would have run the probably the hard to medium strategy had they known that the track was going to rubber in as much as it did, and that the performance was going to be, the differential was going to be that much based on that, because the medium tire in the second half of the race was so much faster than the medium tire at the first half of the race. And when you factor all those kinds of things in, again, like that, even now they still have such limited data because that's such a big performance differential. They don't know whether or not that's going to happen again at this next race. Like, obviously it shouldn't because it's a regular racetrack and it gets a lot of running, but you just don't know what these tires are going to do. So it's a really difficult situation for all the teams to be in with having these allocations set for them.
Yeah, it's like strategy has been pretty limited in terms of choices this season anyway. And I can't see this making much difference. Could it be that they've brought in a new rule and not really thought through the consequences of it?
Oh, Chris, behave. Like they do that. Don't be silly.
Never.
It's Formula
Never
One. This is the pinnacle of motorsport we're talking about. Nothing ever goes wrong.
And everything's always thought about and considered.
Yeah, completely.
They're very careful about every decision they make. They weigh up every factor. They simulate things. They run they have hours and hours and hours of time to figure this all out. They have these are the best minds in the world.
Next on the list, Red Bull. Just 14 points between the two drivers. Who's going to take the advantage this time? Verstappen's got pretty good record at this track. I don't really know what Perez's history is like at Imola. I guess he's not
average.
Yeah. What did he do there last year? It was a 1-2 last year. Just the 16.5 seconds between them.
Just that.
Although Perez is a lot closer to Verstappen this season than he was last year. We're checking the chat, says it depends on what Leclerc does in Q3, which is a very good point.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, he out-qualified in 1 year, didn't he? Was that last year? No, year before? He out-qualified Max, didn't he, in his first year there?
I'm
sure he did. I might be wrong. I feel like he has out-qualified Max there at least once in his time at Red Bull.
Yeah, I think he was maybe their first season together. He did. Yeah, I think you're right.
But then Max still won the race anyway, so...
Yeah, of course he did.
Moot.
And then a final point of interest before we go into predictions, just to spice things up, is that it's currently looking like a very good chance of rain across the whole weekend.
Oh.
So they might not even run the hard tyres in qualifying.
That might all become academic. Yeah.
How ironic would it be if they've done all this organisation of these tyres for qualifying and it just
Don't
rains
even touch
all day?
them.
I would love that part of me
just
inside.
All wets all weekend.
The weather looking out for the fans.
I mean, I would rather it didn't rain, because that means that they can do their little experiment, have done with it, and we can all move on in our lives.
Yeah,
and
we can all decide it's a terrible idea.
Yeah, we can all just decide what we all already know, that this is a rubbish idea, and we can get on with having a normal Formula One season, please. Good chance of rain over the weekend. Who's good in the rain?
Well, let's do some predictions, and you can answer that question.
Let's do predictions. Right, so if you haven't been here before, you can head to backofthegrid.com and find out what this is all about by registering and joining in. Basically, we're going to predict 5 things for the race this weekend, and you could join in too, as I say. And if you get 5 out of 5, get them all correct, there is a prize to be had. So always worth doing, even if you've not been with us since the start of the season. So yeah, let's go through ours and see how we land this week. Fastest qualifier who will 100% be on soft tyres. There's no doubt on that.
Or wets.
And or intermediates.
Or could be intermediates or maybe wets, actually, yeah, to be fair. But yeah, where we're going, Stu, I'm going to go to you first.
This is very difficult, given that it's possible changeable conditions.
Yeah.
I think the safe bet is probably Verstappen. So wait, it's actually not. No, it's not. I'm gonna scratch that. No, it's not. The safe money, I think, for me is probably on Leclerc.
Okay. I like all Chris's noises. That means he's definitely got a thought in mind. Shoot it.
Alonso.
Ooh. This is going to get
wet qualifying in Canada last year. He stuck that dog of an Alpine on the front row.
This is going to get real interesting real fast, because I've changed my mind due to the weather. And I don't know if it's a wise choice, because if the weather doesn't come, I'm screwed. But Hamilton.
Ooh.
I was going to say Perez, but the weather thing's changed my mind. So I'm now really, really hoping that it rains.
Wow.
Well, none of us has ever Verstappen, so he's guaranteed pole now, isn't he?
Yeah, pretty much.
True.
Okay, win. I am going to say Verstappen there, because I just, at this moment in time, I just can't look beyond that, unfortunately. But I can hope to be proven wrong. This is one of those points where in a weekend where I do it to try and earn a point, but I'm sort of kind of happy if I lose a point here, because it just means something interesting's happened. But yeah.
Okay.
Which of you wants to go next? Chris, you could go next. Because you went first overall last time.
It's going to be really boring. I do think there's potential for a bit of wet weather chaos.
Mm-hmm.
Seems quite prone to wet conditions as well, this circuit. That would be the few times that we've been to it in modern F1 machinery. It's definitely been a lot of wet weather around.
Yeah.
And it's a highly used track. It's like very rubbered in.
Yeah.
And the walls are like close. It's a
quite
proper
close.
traditional racetrack.
Yeah.
Come on, Chris, gonna have to rush.
Oh, do you know what? Alonso. I've said Alonso's going to get a win in the first sort of third of the season.
Okay. Stu, what about you?
You know, it'd be really fun if Lance Stroll won it.
Imagine gets a win
really
before Alonso.
I'm going to do it. Why not? I'm going to do it. I've got barely any points. I'm already out of this.
Go for
it's a long season, Stu.
Yeah, it's true.
We keep saying it.
Chris, who do you think first DNF will be?
Who's it last year? Oh, of course, it was Carlos Sainz last year, wasn't it? It was Carlos Sainz in most of the opening races of the season last year.
Yes.
This year it is going to be... It's going to be Esteban Ocon. Don't know why. Alpine are having a rough time right now. Let's just pile on the misery.
Yeah.
Stu, what do you think?
I'm going to go De Vries. I think that's a safe one. Since I've sacrificed the win points, I'm going to go De Vries.
I'm struggling. I'm going to just pick at random and say Albon. That's just someone that might be in the middle of the pack due to that qualifying session and may end up going backwards.
I just want to say that I have nothing against Nick De Vries. I think he's really good. I think he's just in an absolute dog of a car. That's really,
it's
really
awful.
difficult to drive.
It isn't a great car at all. Number of finishes. Stu, you can go first on this one.
The weather's going to be a factor. I'm going to go down. I'm going to go low, especially based on what happened in Australia, where the conditions were basically okay. We still had a wild race. I think throw some rain into the mix this early in the season, and we could have some carnage. So I'm going to say 15 finishes. I think there'll be 5 retirements this race.
I was wondering if you would go as low as I was thinking, and you went exactly as low as I was thinking. I'm also going to say 15.
I nearly went for 14, but I just didn't. My brain kicked into gear.
I'm ever so slightly more optimistic that people could finish at this circuit, and I'm going to say 16. So that's me. Random driver, Chris, please inform us who that will be this weekend.
Driver this week is Charles Leclerc.
Ooh.
Oh,
that's perfect. That is absolute. That is chef's kiss perfect for me. I'm going to put him in first place. I'm going to hedge my bets.
Oh,
yeah. Okay.
Interesting.
What
Ferrari in Italy. Well, Ferrari in San Marino.
It's in Italy.
It's in Italy.
Well, Leclerc. Where's Leclerc going to finish? I'll say 4th. I'm really leaning into a chaotic race this week.
So we've got a 1st for Stu, a 4th for Chris.
Come on, Tom. I'm going to have to rush you.
6th. I just can't see it. I can't see it. Right.
That's predictions.
That is us done on predictions. As I mentioned before, head to backofthegrid.com if you want to get involved. There's also some links on there to our fantasy leagues, so you can join us on Grid Rival or the official F1 Fantasy as well. So hit those links if you want to join us there. Does that bring us around to some inbox, fellas?
It does.
It does indeed.
I'll hit that jingle then.
Keep it saying now. Stay out. Box. Hey, man.
Okay, I'll grab the first one. Wesley says, "Hey man, many teams are expected to bring updates to their cars this weekend. Do you think any of them will be enough to allow them to take the fight to Red Bull, or will it just tighten the battle for second on down?"
Unfortunately, I don't think it will. There's no silver bullets in F1 car development. And it's not like Red Bull are going to be standing still either. They're going to be bringing updates as well.
Yeah,
exactly.
The gap might close a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be much more than that, personally.
My heart says that I would like to see the gap close somewhat. I would like to see Mercedes leapfrog Aston Martin and have some pace, but I think really for Mercedes this weekend is going to be all about getting as much running in as possible, keeping the cars in one piece, and if it rains, that's a bad situation for Mercedes. I think they really, really need just some normal track time to get their head around all of these big components that they're putting on the car. I don't think Red Bull are going to bring as much as everyone else, but I could be completely wrong, because last race they brought a whole new side pod setup. So I think a lot of Red Bull, based on that, I think a lot of Red Bull's really big upgrades will either have been scheduled and probably not going for this race. I think if you're changing your side pods this early in the season, they're probably not going to bring anything massive for this one. But I think it will tighten the battle for second down maybe a little bit, but again, it's going to be a lot about understanding, especially if you're bringing a really, really big upgrade. It's going to be about working out how all those new components all work together and what effect each individual extrapolating what each individual thing has done to your car to get
Stu's getting attacked by
to
some
get you further
wildlife.
forward. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I think.
I think like engineers are going to be praying for no rain this weekend.
Yeah,
like
especially when they've all brought a
it'll be
number
the
of upgrades.
worst possible thing for them.
Yeah. Learn nothing.
Next question from Jose. Hey compadres, why is the incredibly long named Imola race named as such? And will this be a circuit that fits Checo or Max more? Personally, I think this is a very Alonso circuit, and he'll do very well here. I like your thinking. I agree that I think it is a very Alonso circuit.
I wish I'd thought to say Alonso for the.
Why is the long named race named as such? Money.
Yeah, sponsorship.
It's just money. Yeah,
just money.
It's just money. And will it be a circuit that fits Checo or Max more?
I think probably. It's hard to tell this season because Checo's been so good so far.
I think it does suit Checo better, but Max will probably still beat him, basically. Like, not to the degree of, like, this massively swings the race in Checo's favour, basically. This is part of those run that I see Checo being able to, like, really take the fight to Max at because they're going to be circuits he's strong at. Like, this whole run of sort of street and car park circuits, as I called them last time.
Maybe the wall being so close in Imola will, like, trick him into thinking he's on a street track and he'll be good.
Exactly. And it's narrow. Like, the track itself is narrow, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, what are the aspects of street circuits that make them street circuits, and what what duality is there between those and with Imola circuit? And I think that's definitely one of them. Like, mistakes are very costly at street circuits. Perez, maybe not so much this season, but certainly in places like Monaco, Perez has been a lot less incident prone than, say, Verstappen has. Verstappen had a couple of years where he just couldn't get a lap in at Monaco.
Yeah.
So, it's going to be obviously he can get a lap in, he can drive the car around there, but to a real top push lap, 10th lap, I think Verstappen does struggle in those kind of situations because he is just so on the edge. And that's kind of I think Verstappen has that little bit more of I guess to a normal person, he's a bit more mental, a bit more of a nutter. Like, he cares less about if he dies.
He's definitely more of a risk taker with laps as well.
Yeah.
Like, it was last year, wasn't it, in Jeddah when he tagged the outside of the wall in the final corner trying to maximize the exit, and you do see that from him.
You see that from both him and Leclerc, though. Like, think about how many times Leclerc's been hitting a wall at, like, Monaco, Baku, Imola. Like,
Monaco a couple of years ago.
Yeah, they're both quite bad for that. And, like, it tends to be the fast chicanes that catch them out because they just try and take too much speed through it. Like, you just have to look at Leclerc specifically, like, coming out of the swimming pool, heading up to the castle, the quick right-left at Imola. Like, they've all got very similar characteristics there, which is a very tight but potentially fast chicane with a wall on the exit. All three of them. And
for me, Verstappen's much better in the really high speed stuff.
Yeah. I'd agree there.
I think it's fair to say, like, if you wanted to be, no, I'm not going to say it, but I think he's got a bit more courage than maybe what
that's
Perez
a nice
got.
way of putting it.
Yeah, I can see that. So have we answered the question there?
I think we have answered the question.
I think we have.
Yeah.
I'll read the next one. Childish Shadbono, which I think is a reference to what I think it is, but if it is, it's good.
Sadbino, isn't it? Childish Sadbino.
I think it's Sabino with a letter or two missing.
There's vowels missing. I mean,
but it's the internet. You never spell everything with all the letters. It's the internet.
I want it to be Sadbono, but if it's a true play on words of Gambino, it would be Sadbino. Who knows?
My tires have gone.
That's what I think it is. Anyway,
tweet us again and tell us the answer. Anyway, after the DRS and push to pass debate, I want to know how push to pass would affect qualifying. Would they have a certain amount for the lap, or would they just get none at all? I don't keep up with IndyCar much, so I don't actually know how they do it.
That's interesting. there was a time when Formula One used to allow them to use their DRS freely across a qualifying lap.
Yeah,
and it was terrifying.
It was terrifying and brilliant at the same
remember,
time. I wish they'd kept that. There was a time at the Australian Grand Prix, and I think Hulkenberg came around the final corner, opened up the DRS just a moment too soon, lost loads of downforce, and therefore lost his rear end. And put it in the wall, put it on the inside of the exit of the corner. Like really, really strange accident to see, but it was purely because he'd opened the DRS too soon, lost loads of downforce, and lost the rear.
I remember in the Vettel Red Bull years, I think it was when they had the blown rear diffuser that was so good on the Red Bull, and they were taking turn 8 at Istanbul Park with DRS open, and every other driver was like, I don't know how they're doing it. I wouldn't even dream of opening DRS through that. To answer the question, more IndyCar educated people than us did reply to that tweet to say that they don't use push to pass in qualifying, basically. It's only a race thing. Which
And when we had something similar with the KERS deployment in Formula One, obviously not the same thing, but similar, that was you could use it at will whenever you saw fit, but you had a set amount per lap.
It was like 7 seconds a lap, was it?
I think it depended on the circuit. It depended on the circuit as to how much you should actually get out of it. But it was essentially a set amount. You could use it that per lap. And then the same applied in qualifying. You couldn't just use it all the time. You had the same amount as you would during the race, on a normal lap.
And that has kind of evolved now in Formula One into the when you hear on the radio an engineer to say to a driver, you can use overtake, it means that you can push the button and you can save up your deployment, like we saw Verstappen doing actually the last race, and you can release that deployment at the opportune moment to get past your rival and use it as kind of like a push to pass button. So it does already exist.
Yeah, it still technically exists, doesn't it?
Formula One. You just don't hear much about it because it's much more integrated into the systems of the car than say in IndyCar having that button where they only get, there's no particular rule around it in Formula One. It's just part of your package. Yeah. Whereas in Indy, obviously they have it as a very set part of the rule system inside of IndyCar.
Yeah. Because for the most part, on a standard racing lap in F1, the electrical deployment is just automated. It's not like they are choosing when to use it. But as you say, they can back off, put it into harvest mode for a lap or two. So then they've got some more stable with the battery to then launch an attack, which is interesting. I'd love them to show more of that on the broadcast. I think I'd love to know more about what teams and drivers are doing around that stuff.
Who wouldn't want you to know that?
Everybody involved in the teams.
Yeah, anyone who's a team or a driver. Yeah. Next one then, from Paper Camera, isn't it? Usually.
Yeah, I think that's my typo. I think. Sorry, Paper Camera.
Paper Camera. Do we actually know what problem the sprint racers are trying to solve? The venues can't be too bothered because people are turning up anyway. The races are boring, so the viewers are not served. So they are really generating. Are they really generating that much advertising revenue? I think the advertising revenue has already been generated because people are already there watching.
Yeah.
So it's a valid question. I think it's a very valid question.
It is. I guess they're trying to have more. They're trying to have more people watching across a race weekend, ultimately. Like right now, the viewing figures for practice 1, 2, and 3 are probably pretty damn low. Obviously, qualifying is very high and the race is the highest. So by dropping a practice session, adding a competitive session, they're trying to get more eyes on it. The problem, of course, is that to do that, they're moving qualifying to a Friday when a lot of people have jobs. So less people end up. You're just moving the viewers to the sprint race instead of the qualifying session for the most part.
Yeah. I think there's two angles to it. There's that, and then the other one is trying to have something that is a tiny condensed version of a normal Formula One weekend to appeal to maybe somebody that doesn't have the quite the interest or the attention span or whatever it might be to do the whole weekend or the whole race. And they're trying to maybe lure people in with these shorter formats. I don't know. I feel like, I'm not saying that that's correct and that would work, but I think that's how FOM think. And that's why they then do it, because that's how they think.
I think also, like, and kind of to play devil's advocate, but also like it is something that we should probably consider, is the fact that a lot of people, and I think you raised this one actually, Tom, a couple of weeks ago, people who are watching these sessions, the more meaningful sessions, are not necessarily always watching them live. So if you can create sessions that people will tune into after the fact, they'll go on F1 TV or whatever catch-up TV format they've got. If they're getting more eyes on the sport than they would have, no one's tuning in on F1 TV to rewatch FP1 or 2 or 3, are they? But they might tune in later to see qualifying before they watch the race live,
maybe.
or they, as part of your F1 week. Say you don't get much chance to watch Formula One over a race weekend. What sessions are you going to watch? You're probably going to, if you're away for the weekend and then you come back, you're probably going to stick qualifying on, and then you're probably going to watch the race on catch up, right? Both of those.
Yeah.
So if they can make it so that they've got, instead of having just those 2 sessions that you're going to catch up on, but instead you're going to watch sprint qualifying, sprint race, then regular qualifying, then regular race, that's 2 more sessions that you're watching on catch up that you wouldn't necessarily watch.
Yeah.
So I think if there's a logic to what they're doing, as whether we like it or not, that for me would be the logic. I think we've spent a lot of time, especially myself, looking at it as someone who watches Formula One live, and actually people aren't consuming the content necessarily live these days in the same way that people have in the past. I think people are much more willing to watch it a little bit later and then tune into the hot debate on Twitter.
So later. I guess the thing that sort of puts that in perspective for you is I'm literally just looking at the viewing figures on YouTube specifically for Miami last weekend. So you've got
these are for the highlights
5
videos, obviously.
This is for the highlight videos. Races. Yeah, so this is just highlight videos. You've got 5.5 million views in total across all the practice sessions. That many people also then watch the race highlights. 4.8 million people watch the qualifying highlights. To then compare that to
what did FP3
Azerbaijan
on its own?
FP3 specifically was the lowest of them all with 1 million.
Less than a million. Oh, a million.
Yeah, so it was a million for FP3. FP1 and 2 got just over 2 million each, which is why it's kind of averaged out at 5.5 across them all. When you look at Azerbaijan, so FP1 got 1.1 million, qualifying got 4.3, but then the sprint shootout and the sprint race got 2.5 and 3.6. Go on. I forgot what the word I'm looking for is, but yeah, for respectively, that's what I was looking for. So 2.5 for the shootout, 3.6 for the actual sprint race. So you've got more views across the 2 live sessions than you do across the 3 practice sessions.
And there's probably a similar pattern to the rewatches that they have on F1 TV as well.
And so when Stefano Domenicali comes out and talks about how successful sprint races are, that's what he's talking about.
That is the kind of metric.
He doesn't care about what people say about the races themselves.
Yeah.
There are
that's
eyes
not his
on
metric.
That's the metric.
His metric for whether or not it's successful isn't whether or not you like it. It's whether or not he's made money from it. Those numbers mean that he has. So that tells you everything you need to know. I think we've answered that one really well.
I've read an amazing thing on Reddit the other day talking about Stefano Domenicali and the kind of things he says, and it was something along the lines of never trust a judgment from someone whose job depends on what that judgment is.
Yeah.
And of course he's going to come out and say how brilliant all of these things are, because if they're not brilliant, he's not doing his job properly. So there we go. Yeah. So the next question. Is it me? It's me.
Yes,
it's from Michelle. Who is more likely to have their seat next season, Nick or Logan?
What, their own seat or
any seat?
Logan Sargent is in F2.
No, Logan.
He's in Williams.
I mean that shows how good a season he's having in your eyes.
That's how anonymous he's been.
Probably Logan.
Yeah, I think it is. I think Williams are going to stick with him. It'll take a lot for Williams to turf him out after fast tracking him through.
Yeah, I think having an American is a good value for Williams.
Yeah, it's great for them.
And I think the difference there is as well is who's waiting in the wings. Like Red Bull generally have more people that they could put in an AlphaTauri. Williams, not so much.
That's true. You got
that's
options,
true.
don't they? Yeah. Cool. We've got that one. Next one.
Next one. Andrea Hanna says, what do you think about the quali format with the Q1 hard tyres, Q2 medium, Q3 soft? I mean, it just mentions that it should be this weekend, which we've said it is. Also, with there being rain or the fact that there could be rain, would they then move this to another track if it didn't get used? I think that last bit, yes.
That would require organisation. So probably they would, but...
They've already said they're going to do this at 2 races this season. They said the first will be Imola. They've said they're going to try another race that's not been announced. But yeah, I suspect if this one was completely washed out, they probably would still do 2 and pick another one. But yeah, I think we've talked about all of that quite a lot already. So
yeah, I don't think it's
enough tyre talk. More than enough tyre talk.
Tyres are not the most exciting thing, and plus, again, it's just like it ain't broke, don't fix it. I don't know. I get the motivation, but just there's better ways of doing these things. Last final question for this week. Ashley Foster, longtime friend of the show, says, "Hey man, which Grand Prix has the shortest name?" And I believe Tom has the answer to that.
If you're certain the answer, Tom, I think I know the answer.
I don't.
You tell me what you think you know the answer is, and I'll tell you factually.
First of all, great question off the back of this upcoming race. I think the answer is the Swiss Grand Prix.
Oh, we're talking ever or this season?
The Swiss Grand Prix.
I think ever. No, I'm naming ever.
Okay, you've gone way deeper on this than me. I've just looked at this season. So there's 2 races that don't have a sponsor as their official title, and that is the Azerbaijan Grand Prix and the Grand Prix de Monaco. And de Monaco is
of course,
less letters than
a lot less characters.
Azerbaijan.
We're counting spaces.
And that is included counting spaces, yeah. So the Formula 1 Grand Prix de Monaco is officially the shortest one currently on the calendar.
I think going back to before they had sponsors, I can't think, when it was just the whatever Grand Prix, I can't think of one shorter than Swiss. But if anyone can think of a Grand Prix that had less than 5 letters in its name, please
Imola wasn't
the
Imola GP, below. Was it? It was a San Marino GP. Yeah. So Imola wouldn't work anymore.
So there's listeners' homework for next week.
Yeah. Do your homework, leave a comment, and we will read it out. We do our best to read all the comments that we can.
Yes.
So thank you very much for joining us. If you want to submit predictions, head over to backofthegrid.com, and there's all the information there about joining the Predictions League. It's worth joining because there's a prize for, as Tom said earlier, there's a prize for anyone who gets 5 out of 5. So even if you haven't joined yet, it's well worth taking part. Because there will be a prize for you if you can get the full suite of correct answers. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all the usual spots. Just search for Back of the Grid. And of course, we're on YouTube now, so please do subscribe and hit the bell, as they say on YouTube, to get all the information about when we post a new video. We're posting lots of shorts and things at the moment and doing our best to create much more video content for you guys. And yeah, that is it for this week. So thank you so much for joining us. Take care of yourselves and goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.